veio.
What was that?
Yes, you can start now, Michelle.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Okay, and good morning.
All right, Michelle, you can start. This is your first slide.
Thank you. Hello to everyone and welcome to the first Discovery Summit of 2022 hosted by ISSIP, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals. ISSIP supports the development of people-centered, data-intensive innovation that benefits business, economy, society, and humanity. We encourage you to engage with ISSIP. Individual membership is free, and you'll see in the Zoom chat today, there are links there where you can register to receive the newsletter monthly and to see upcoming ISSIP events, which run from the weekly speaker series that's running now to our single-hour Discovery Cafes, to the more in-depth Discovery Summit that brings us together today. For ISSIP regulars wondering maybe why a new face is welcoming you today, you'll see that Yassi Moghadam, who is an ISSIP co-founder and the executive director who has led this organization for 10 years, so ably is serving as a panelist today. And earlier this year, Yassi shifted to a role on our board of directors, still remains very engaged with the organization. I'm Michelle Carroll, the new executive director, effective in April of this year. And I'm looking forward to working with you, with our volunteers, our ambassadors, our leadership team to grow and build on the foundation established in ISSIP's first 10 years to grow global awareness, institutional memberships, and participation in the ISSIP platform going forward. So a little housekeeping before we start. Unless you are the speaker, please make sure that you are on mute. We are recording today. And do use the Zoom chat for any questions you may have or comments. We do encourage. And there is still time. You'll see in the chat the very short survey where you can, we'd appreciate you filling out. And at the end, there's an opportunity for you to provide your position statement for inclusion to the white paper. Also in the chat, there's a link where you can register now for part 2 in this 2-part Discovery Summit series on the future of expertise. The second part will be September 28th. And for those who want to join us in person in September, we'll be in person in Silicon Valley and have the virtual. Can we back up 2 slides? It'll also be virtual.
Sorry.
So turning to today, slide 3. We're so grateful to each of these incredibly distinguished business executives, thought leaders, government program directors, and executive directors of nonprofit for making the time to share your perspective with ISSIP members and guests today. ISSIP does award all panelists with a badge of recognition as a small token of our appreciation. Our moderator today, an event organizer, is IBM Distinguished Fellow and ISSIP co-founder, longtime board leader, Jim Sporer. You'll see on both panels that Jim has recruited the powerful blend of perspectives and thought leadership that drew me and likely many of you to ISSIP as a professional society so worth engaging in. We'll hear today from business and industry, from IBM and Mastercard to Amazon, to government, the National Science Foundation, and nonprofit leaders from ISSIP itself to APQC, the American Productivity and Quality Center, and to academia, University of California, Santa Cruz in Silicon Valley, to Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, and UFMG, the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil. So welcome, and let me turn it over to 2022 ISSIP President, Terry Griffith.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I want to welcome everyone. ISSIP is a unique organization in my life, and I hope in yours as well, in that we combine industry and academic pursuits, but all with the same goal. And we really bring that diverse perspective, global perspective, to the questions of service innovation, as you're going to see today. And I'm going to say that Michelle has done such a fantastic job that I just want to highlight for everyone the chance to join us and to become a volunteer in an area that is especially meaningful to you. And we'll keep giving you opportunities to do that as we go along. We're a little over 2,000 members and happy to grow both institutionally and from individual members. Individual members get to join without a fee, and we look forward to having an even more diverse population of colleagues to come forward and attack the questions of the future of work, the future of education, and all the things that we need to be able to do our best work today. So I'm looking forward to the first panel. Thank you all.
Great, thank you, Terry. These are our first 4 panelists, and as you can see, they're distinguished industry speakers, as well as nonprofit speakers and government speakers. And I'm Jim Sporer. I'll be the moderator for the first panel. The future of expertise turned out to be one of the most interesting topics that our ISSIP Strategy Council recommended that we do discovery summits on this year. So future of expertise affects industry, university, government, and has also a lot of consequences for individual professionals. So it's a fantastic topic for us to get into. It's also a controversial topic. Competence, as learned and perpetuated by communities, is one thing, and ISSIP has done a lot to look at the future of work, a lot to look at the future of skills, but expertise is more than that. It's legitimated competence. Therefore, institutions matter. And if you haven't seen Tom Nichols' book, The Death of Expertise, or the big articles in the Chronicle of Higher Education, just search for Chronicle of Higher Education, Future of Expertise. You'll see all kinds of amazing nuances about expertise and the future of expertise. Also, that last little picture on this slide, I created this morning with Mini Dolly. If you haven't tried Mini Dolly, go try it. You know, it's an AI that generates images, and I typed in expertise and trust in the future of AI and got a bunch of images from Dolly. So also the relationship between AI and competence and expertise is going to be an issue. So this is just one of the most fascinating topics that we could have, and we're really lucky to have our panelists today to share their perspectives on this fascinating topic. We did do a survey. We came up with 10 predictions about the future of expertise based on over 100, I think we're up to 110 or 120 position statements now, and you can take the survey and add your position statement as well. But I just wanted to briefly show you on the first, and there's already more survey results that I have to compile, but the one thing that everybody agreed on, pretty much, not 100%, was that the future of expertise includes lifelong learning. And the future of expertise includes collaboration with AI and robots. So those were the two there was most agreement on. Where there was least agreement was the future of expertise includes more misinformation, erosion of trust, and the rise of powerful influences with vested interest. There was least agreement there. And also the future of expertise includes racing to keep up with the latest hot skill. There was not so much agreement there. There were a bunch of other things in the survey. Again, we'll put the link to the survey in the Zoom chat, so you can go out and take it. It just takes 2 minutes. You just write, I agree or disagree with these predictions. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce my great friend and colleague, actually, IBM General Manager of Industry Edge Cloud, Utpal Mangal. Utpal, you have to run for travel, so over to you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Sorry about that. You're too kind. Really appreciate it. Let me quickly provide my industry perspective, as Jim said, on the future of expertise. I will make 3 key points, team, that I think are very, very relevant from a future of expertise and leveraging the industry eminence. The first one, as skills evolve, the T-shaped skills are also evolving. Historically and traditionally, in terms of skills, we expected a broad set of knowledge and then a depth in a particular area. And in many cases, those broad skills were a combination of obviously hard skills, and you also need soft skills. And then people had depth in a particular area. Obviously, from a technology standpoint, people had expertise or depth in data science, AI, machine learning, could be business analysts, etc. But the other thing that we need to layer on top of that, and I use the word on top of that because I don't want to change the T-shaped model, is industry eminence. This is becoming absolutely critical. And as new students join the workforce, as professionals move from one company to another, the knowledge of a particular industry, and industry can be categorized in multiple ways: banking industry, financial services industry, insurance, and I can go on and on and on, industrial, manufacturing, public sector, telco, media, entertainment. The amount of knowledge that you have is definitely becoming critical because companies value that. The second point that I would mention is the growth of ecosystems and platforms. That's the new business model. No organization is able to own and know everything end to end. And so as technology evolves and as businesses start leveraging more of each other, the expertise on having a basic understanding for the beginners and obviously deeper understanding for experts is in the knowledge of how to build, how to grow, how to leverage ecosystems and run businesses on platforms. And when I say you run businesses on platforms, the expertise can be at multiple levels. It's about building a platform. It's about enabling a platform. It's about leveraging a platform. It's about monetizing the platform for your specific needs. The third that I would say is a combination of, and a big focus that is happening with industry and academia. Businesses are very laser focused on ensuring that they get the right workforce, and they are collaborating with academia in ensuring that the right level of skills, the right level of knowledge is imparted to the graduating students so that they can join their respective companies as they get into the workforce. So the third pattern that I'm seeing is significant investments being made by companies, businesses, organizations in certain specific universities that they're focused on, tailoring the program without changing the mandate overall, but tailoring the program to their respective requirements. And I think that's a positive, indication of collaboration. And I think it's gaining momentum and it's going in the right direction, because skills like data science needs to move from theoretical to practical. Skills like AI, machine learning, and obviously I have a more technology background, so I'm talking on those terms, but they need to evolve from concepts to practical. So that's the third theme that I'm seeing in terms of collaboration between industry and businesses to create the next set of future of expertise in the workforce. So in summary, back to the three things that I mentioned. Number one, to recap, the T-shaped skills are evolving with a layer of industry on top. It's absolutely critical. Number two, the businesses are moving into an ecosystem and platform model. We need to make sure that that's where the future of expertise, that's where majority of the innovations and monetization will happen. And the third is extreme collaboration, which is just the beginning. We're just seeing the tip of the ice here between businesses, industries, and universities. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Back to you, Jim.
Great. Thank you so much, Utpal. And Utpal is also our VP of ISSIP 2022. So that means he'll be president of ISSIP in 2023. Thank you so much for your opening panelist talk, Utpal. And I think we do have time for one quick question. I'll give an opportunity, maybe two questions. I'll give an opportunity if anybody wants to put it in the chat. But while we're waiting, I just have to say, I agree that we definitely need more investment between industry and academia. And broader than just the technical areas, I think a lot of the social emotional aspects of working in industry are changing rapidly. So that's a great point that you made, Paul.
Yeah, and I wanna just chime in on that. Obviously, we tend to get Jim, you hit the nail on the head. We obviously tend to get a little bit more technical and talk about hard skills, and obviously being from a technology background, that's the first thing that we always start thinking. But you are absolutely right. Stepping back, the social skills, the soft skills, the team collaboration, the leadership, the social networking, those are also things that are very, very important, because those are more difficult to build than the hard skills. As one of my mentors always said, I need people with the right attitude, and then I can work on the hard skills.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember when IBM rolled out its positive leadership training to all us executives just before the COVID. I mean, it was perfect. Somebody had a premonition, I think, and it was excellent expertise. And I don't remember a required training program at Expertise where I had so many people in my group saying, I'm glad I took this positive leadership training. This is really helping me a lot. So I think both the technical skills and the social emotional are critical for life and industry. Thanks, Paul. I know you have a busy schedule today. You're running to catch a plane. Thank you so much. And just a reminder to everybody, please stay on mute unless you're talking. Put questions into the Zoom chat. This is going to be recorded. So if people have to jump in and out, we're going to make sure they get the recording afterwards. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our next panelist, Heather Yurko. Heather is the VP of Talent at Mastercard. She is also a former ISSIP president, vice president and president. So Heather, welcome to the panel, and thank you for sharing your comments.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jim. I'm very excited to be here today. Wonderful to see all of you. In our time together, I'm going to chat a little bit about emergent expertise, what this means, what this may look like, but ways for us to start thinking about finding and creating knowledge in the future, and some of the work that we're doing right now at Mastercard. To Paul's point, really critical, and to Jim's point, really critical to have the partnership between academia and industry in this journey forward. So one of the approaches that we really take into consideration looking at the future is the combination of the workforce, the workplace, and the work that we're doing. And so as we're looking forward into the future at Mastercard, we're looking at how people in the overall workforce is really designed, managed, enabled, and rewarded. So looking very holistically at what our workforce looks like. Starting then to consider the workplace. Where does work take place, right? This is something we've seen quite a bit over the last 2 years, the acceleration of remote work and everything that has to come along to enablement, as well as the work itself. So how we're doing this work, the methods, the tools that we need to be able to achieve it, especially if the workplace is shifting quite rapidly. And then finally, really looking at organizational culture. And so having that as that X factor almost, bringing all of these things together to look at how different organizations are really differentiated in a meaningful and competitive way. So for today, although at Mastercard, we do look at all of these different tensions and where we want to start pushing this. For today, we're just going to focus on the work and talk a little bit about emergent expertise and what this means. So as we start to balance between the tasks that we're doing and the outcomes that we're driving, as we start to balance the difference between automation, AI, and human work, including having humans in the loop, and as we start to balance between analog and digital work, there are many, many shifts that we're starting to see as far as expertise that's needed to be able to shift and move between all of these tensions. So we've seen that there are 4 validated workforce trends that have really started to come out in the way in which we're thinking about talent, skills, competencies, expertise at Mastercard. One of the things that we've seen quite a bit is that the skills and competencies are absolutely changing, especially as remote work and flexibility around the work that we do and how and where it gets done. All of those things are starting to move and shift, which means, we're going to need some additional or new expertise or emergent expertise in these areas. There are absolutely new ways of people managing their careers. Jim, back to the point on seeing, everyone really agreeing on there will be lifelong learning involved. This really factors in really deeply to how you manage your career. Looking at the diversification of our talent supply, like where are we getting people from? Are we, pulling from universities? Are we looking at people who are reimagining or reinventing their careers? Are we looking internally at our own talent? And then also looking very, very especially at how this work is getting done. So dynamic and flexible teams, bringing that concept of a gig economy really into our own workplace and looking at the skills and talent available to us more broadly instead of just within a given team or a given organization that we may be part of or leading. So part of what we've seen is there has been a lot of difficulty hiring talent. And, you hear a lot about all of the shifts that are happening with the great reshuffle or the great resignation. There's been plenty of terms that have been given to it. But despite the fact that, for the worker, it's fantastic, many, many options, people are re-examining meaning in their lives and how that shows up in the work that they do. From an employer perspective, it can be very difficult to hire the talent that we're looking for that has not only the knowledge and expertise in a given subject matter area, but also what is going to be needed for this emergent world that we're now sitting in. So what are the skills that are going to be necessary to work in this digital world? The other piece as well is for folks that have been in the workplace longer and maybe are more accustomed to having that face-to-face, on-site or on-prem way of working together. Having that co-location is absolutely starting to shift. And so looking at this hybrid world and picking up some new and additional competencies that are going to be needed to be really successful, in this new way of working and new work that needs to get done. The other thing that we've seen quite a bit is there are new ways to develop expertise. So, I think in more historical or traditional models, you would think of an expert as someone who has really honed their knowledge, their skill, their craft over many, many years and has become the go-to person that everyone wants to work with, in a given area or topic. And what we are seeing now is that because there are these rapid shifts in not only ways of working, but actual roles, right? We're seeing that there are roles that are being replaced or at least supported by AI, and then whole new roles that never existed before emerging simultaneously. And so how that starts to fit into hiring is that if you start thinking about bringing people in that have the expertise that you think you need, you're going to be wrong inside of 18 to 24 months, because there will be new skills that are emerging within that period of time. And so thinking about that from not only a hiring perspective, like how are you consistently doing that, getting the right talent that you need, you also need to think about it as an employee or as, a worker yourself. How am I continuing to learn and grow? What we're starting to see is that this has deep impact on how people think about careers, right? That there will be multiple careers inside of a person's career and multiple shifts and changes in how you think about what progression means. Very rarely is it a ladder now that you're staying within one job family or one set of skills being I-shaped, as compared to what Iqbal was talking about, which is being T-shaped. So we are starting to see much more of that breadth being needed and the ability to shift and change that, that neuroplasticity to continue to learn throughout your entire career. So some of the things that we're looking at Mastercard include, thinking about how we're finding these experts. And in many cases, we are looking at how we grow them internally. And so that has been the focus for us in how do you find and create emergent expertise? And you do that with the people who are available to you. And so a lot of what we've looked at is bringing on talent either through acquisition, but also a lot of this gig economy style freelance working arrangements. So connecting people to each other inside of our own organization and building those collaborative partnerships, and allowing people to kind of constantly reskill themselves. So moving them into other organizations or new areas of subject matter expertise where they're able to learn and stretch and grow while still, staying very tight within and being able to leverage the knowledge and skills that they currently have. And so one of the ways that we've been doing this is through these dynamic networks of teams. And so being able to connect people together to break them out of those rigid organizational structures and have a lot more fluidity around the work that people are doing and who they're working with has really been the solution for us. And so we, over the last year, have built out an internal talent marketplace called Unlocked. It runs on the Gloat platform. And through this body of work that we've been able to really roll out this platform to our employees, we're now starting to get insights into the expertise that we have and also gaps that we have. So where do we really need to start focusing on that? And again, building very specific strategies around, are we going to build by, or create this talent ourselves? We're able to move folks around within the organization if we have critical bodies of work that need to get done and have people volunteer to say, yes, I'm very interested in picking up this body of work as a stretch assignment beyond the day jobs that they have, which allows them to share their expertise in new and different ways, as well as to gain some additional knowledge and expertise because it may be in a new part of the company. We've seen that this really has flattened our organization by making this network really accessible to everyone and democratizing access to the opportunities that we have available in the organization. And we're hoping that over time, this is really going to start future-proofing our workplace, really helping people build the skills and expertise that they need and filling in gaps where we know we may not be able to go out and hire in market because the expertise may not even exist there yet. So we want to take the folks that we have, build on the expertise that they have, and continue to learn and grow within that way. So with that, I will close. I'll open it up, Jim, if we have any additional questions from the community that I can answer.
Yeah, definitely. A quick question for you. So Heather, how internally at Mastercard do people legitimize their expertise, so to speak? Is it through badging? Is it through how do you think about that inside of Mastercard?
It's such a great question. Right now today it's self-report. And so a lot of it is people saying, hey, here's the work that I've done. And so they'll share out some projects that they've worked on previously, when you apply for these projects or stretch assignments. And so the project owner, which does not necessarily have to be a manager, anybody in the company can open a project at any level. But they are the ones that have the opportunity to look over people's past work history and say, hey, it does seem like the work that they've done or the outcomes they've achieved really are demonstrating the expertise that I need. They can also have conversations with folks. And right now we're also looking at what we're calling paired projects. So having people that are seeking to gain skills paired with somebody who already has them, working side by side, almost like an apprenticeship or doing like paired programming together.
Great, great. I know when I was at an executive at IBM, I just retired, there was quite a bit of focus on not just expertise, validated expertise inside of IBM, but also validated expertise externally, technical eminence and having a balance between those two. And I see Yuri Pericek, another retired IBMer from IBM Research. I see Yuri's got a few comments in the chat. I'm trying to see if there's a question there for you, Heather. Oh yes, how is middle and top level management assessed in the context of this new model? Oh, interesting question. Yeah, expertise at the top.
Expertise at the top. What's really interesting is that, a lot of the focuses we've started to shift into this space has been if you are a people manager, and that's, I will assume that that's what you're meaning by that, like middle and top level management. There are absolutely now objectives around you as a people leader promoting your teams to do this work. So really creating that space, that capacity for them to learn and grow, for them to take on these additional projects or to pick up a mentor, to do additional learning. We have meeting-free days 4 times, like 1 every quarter. And then we also have Friday afternoons that are sort of permanently open. You're not supposed to have meetings during that period of time. And that's exactly for this, that you are supposed to be, taking time to be investing in yourself, to be taking courses, to be learning, and to be continuing to show up in a way that's meaningful and necessary, for the work that needs to get done. So as a people leader, if you are not doing that, which again comes through our pulse results, our feedback, all of those things, there's a very close eye being kept to this, and it's tied directly to performance management. It's not just the what you have done, it is also the how. And so that how piece really starts to get into this, and absolutely it impacts people's bonuses directly.
Great. And one more quick question for you, Heather. I see Wilhelm has put a question. Isn't the talent marketplace, I think you call it unlock model, is that limited to a particular type of business, or is that like and role in Mastercard, or is it everybody? Is it like the assistants? Is it like the contractors? Is it like everybody, or just certain roles?
It is everybody.
Okay.
So, from people, as long as you're a full-time employee, you're clearly not available to the contingent workers, since they're not employees and we cannot be developing them because of that. But beyond that, it is absolutely everyone in the company. So yeah, from our business assistants up to our management committee. And we have about, I think it's 93% of our management committee is on this platform, actively participating.
And one last question before we move to the next panelist, Heather. I remember inside of IBM, one of the big challenges was our marketplace was connected to our learning, and our learning was like anybody in the company could contribute learning resources, and it got big inside of IBM, with hundreds of thousands of employees contributing their favorite way they learned and what they learned of technology and business and everything. And I remember our people were always saying the hardest challenge is knowing what to learn next. And so does your Unlock Marketplace give any guidance? Like if somebody's setting their goal on a particular role, or they want to be more like a maverick and be a generalist, does the system give them any guidance on what they should be trying to upskill on?
Yeah, that is such a great question. That is coming today. What we have is our MVP connects into our learning platform, which absolutely, like if there's a particular skill that you've said, hey, I have this skill, or hey, I want to develop this skill, you can go directly into our learning platform and have returned results on like, here's what's available to you, as well as Mastercard curated content. So it does kind of help narrow down all of the things into, hey, these are really good things that we've kind of pre-approved. What this will turn into in our next version is actually learning pathways that will be recommended to you as part of the AI matching that happens on the platform.
Great, fantastic. And just one more comment before we move to the next panelist. I remember inside of IBM, we had, especially in research, we had like some super geniuses who I remember their manager said they're a great person if we're working on a technical problem, but never put them in front of an executive or a customer. And so I think this ability of interactional expertise, like to be able to interact with different audiences in an appropriate way, not just be technically deep, is another aspect of skill development that I'm sure is important in Mastercard. It sure was important in IBM.
It sure is.
Thank you, Heather. And I think you can stick around to the Q&A, the discussion that we'll have at the end after all the panelists have spoken. But let's shift over to Cindy Hubert, who's the Executive Director of APQC, the Productivity and Quality Center, great partner of IBM over the years. So thank you, Cindy, for being our next panelist. And I see Larry Heiner, who's our ISSIP ambassador, who recommended you as a panelist. So I want to give a shout out to Larry and say thank you, Larry. And Cindy, we're really interested. I know APQC has done amazing things with knowledge management over the years. You've got white papers, some for members only, but a lot of them for anybody who's interested. And besides knowledge management, you're looking into AI. And so we'd really like to hear your thoughts on the future of expertise, Cindy.
Jim, thank you so much. It's so nice to be here with this esteemed panel. And I told them one of the best things is I get to learn a lot. I'm a lifetime learner, but yes. And so I want to share with you today, building on some of the things that have been shared already. Let me get my screen up here. What would we do without slides, right? Gives you something to focus on. So, you know, I so appreciate all the comments, and I'll build on some of them. It is true, for over 25 years, I have looked at the world of expertise through the lens of knowledge management. And we started seeing this whole notion of expertise back in, I don't know if any of you remember the year Y2K. We were preparing for it, Jim, a big time. I know Jim was around at that time because he and I talked about it. But that was about the time we started hearing from the energy and oil and gas industry about the big crew change. I don't know if any of you were familiar with that. I actually went to a conference in 2001 where they were talking about sort of the silver tsunami and all their expertise leaving. So we're no strangers to the topic of expertise. And while I certainly don't have a crystal ball, I do see a light at the end of the tunnel light. Now, it seems like every time we get close to that light, that tunnel gets a little bit longer. And so we constantly move the needle and appreciate. But I think, you know, the first question that we had 20 plus years ago was just, why are people so interested in their experts and expertise? And so I think you have to be really true to yourself. It helps with business continuity, as we saw earlier, innovation of your products and services. And most people think it gives them a competitive advantage. And those are all really good things to tie to. So knowledge management has always been very focused on that more tacit knowledge and how to harness it and make it powerful, getting it to other people across the organization. And I think what's happening today that we're seeing is that expertise is just more fluid than it used to be. In other words, what will people need to know compared to what they used to need to know is the big question for us, and what skills will be demanded. And both of our panelists have touched on that. We believe you're not going to have to keep as much in your heads with the AI models that we have, the access to bots. And so, but you are going to need people there to interpret the outputs and to look at it and to provide some context. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and give you maybe a different lens to look at expertise. My title today was actually from some research we did about 8 years ago. We wanted to look at how people were growing and leveraging their expertise. And we have a great body of research on that, getting us started, looking at the STEM model and what people were actually doing. And we've always built on that expertise going. So I'll share a lot of research and I'll follow up with Jim and make sure you get that. But one of the things that we look at very closely is kind of what Heather was talking about, and that is just your customers of those people that come in kind of from a novice perspective, and they grow and mature their skills and they become nexperts. We coined that phrase from Lockheed Martin, where they're not quite the expert, but they know a lot and they can take what an expert knows and not only put it in the same context, but begin to use it in different contexts. And that's where you see the growth. And the whole notion of leadership is, how do you really get leaders involved to accelerate that whole model. And so I think when you look at just over time how you grow and retain expertise, your bookends that I've given you here are pretty classic. People come on board regardless of what they know. There's always an onboarding. You have to make them efficient as soon as possible, productive. And then you have your retirees, and that's usually a horizon where people are going to leave. And sometimes you have people who give longer horizons over 3 to 5 and even bring retirees back. But it's always the middle that intrigues knowledge management professionals the most, which is how do you keep that cycle of knowledge flowing from the expert back to learners and to contributors, knowing that one role can be all of those things, a learner, a contributor, and an expert eventually along the way. So again, when you think about early career opportunities, people are probably recipients of that information. Those are your learners, where they're learning and building competency. As they start to learn, they begin to get brave enough and culturally, hopefully accepted to be able to provide knowledge back. And that's what begins to grow those talent streams and those career paths that lead people to that role of expertise. I always find it interesting when you talk to true experts, technical experts, people who are fellows, they never say, I started out to become an expert. It's just over time and learning cycles and trying more things and being allowed to fail, which is an important piece of all of this, helps propel you up the ladder to that expert. So again, what I want to show is the fluidity across these three categories of learners, contributors, and expertise. Again, there's always building the competencies of those when it comes to new technologies and methodologies. And in some case, contributions can come from relative newcomers. But again, the three in the middle are not strictly career advancement either. They're more of that knowledge persona that you have to look at that tend to build on how one develops and gains experience. So again, knowledge management focuses very much on those strategies that allows people to spin in this mode and develop that expertise. And so I thought I'd share with you again just a little bit. I'm going to focus just on the experts. Again, there's a whole body of work that we've had out there that APQC has in our resource library for those who are members or future members at APQC. You can get to a lot of our research. But I think this is a very interesting in thinking about knowledge management, what we try to do in terms of building expertise. Number one, we just try to take the fatigue out of experts. They tend to be asked a lot of questions. They tend to have a lot of demand on their time to spend with people, mentors, participating in communities of practice, being part of lessons learned, and really providing perspectives on how that works. And so part of the thing is just trying to get them more efficient and only having to share one time, opposed to multiple times, and giving them, again, then very deep, meaningful things to do in terms of wicked problem solving and interesting work. And of course, trying to maintain that work-life balance we're all striving for. They also support the discipline. We rely heavy on that. And Jim, I agree what you've said earlier in the thing. I think you have to look not only at the internal recognition that you get as experts, but so many people are demanding that external recognition because you bring back the creds from a larger global community and you begin to build that reputation inside and outside. And so again, knowledge management support spends a lot of time just providing those forums that experts can share and making sure that when they're mentoring, they're with the right people. It's not that you don't want those novices there, but they're less likely to be able to pick up and just leave and go do something after spending time with an expert. And I think you've got to recognize that so you can set up meaningful interactions and build partnerships with them to give them things. The other thing that I get from a lot of our KM professionals, and they even speak about themselves as those experts, because I've watched a whole body of knowledge management professionals grow into experts over 20 plus years. The teaching is one of the best things. Number one, it helps you continue to learn and challenge what you know and be able to impart your knowledge. And so when we do a lot of work at APQC where it is helping our members elicit that knowledge and get it out. And it's not us doing it, it's getting people in the organization to be able to elicit that, the nexperts, so they can begin to ask the leading questions and get to that deep, deep knowledge that experts have. So again, when you think about just the future of expertise, I think you can't ignore the cycles that have to be gone through. And the question becomes, can we speed those up? That's one of the big challenges for knowledge management. So I wanted to share with you just a case study. So for those of you who don't know APQC, we do tons of research. As Jim said, we do provide benchmark best practices, and we try to give you interactions and produce case studies and all kinds of information. So this is from one of our members, ISSIP and Partners. They're a multinational firm that provides design, engineering, and construction consulting. And they have a fellows program, and we're seeing more and more of fellowships emerge to really call out and categorize those experts that the organization, looks at as the top echelon of expert. And for ISSIP, they have 47 active fellows out of about 13,000 employees. So I will tell you this, that sounds about right to me. When I walk into an organization of 10,000, of 50,000, and they say we have 90% of those people are experts, I start questioning that, because I think that's someone who's not really paying attention to a strategy around expertise and how you really recognize and harness it. So ISSIP has done a very good job of understanding what they want them to do. These individuals help ISSIP solve challenging problems, and they're teachers and communicators. And so when both of our panelists were talking about how do you go into those softer skills and begin to do it? This is part of what their fellowship program does, and it challenges those experts to really understand themselves, to understand the people, and that goes all the way from just, not only just culturally what is acceptable, but how do people really behave? What are their behaviors, and what are those drivers of their behaviors? So it has them do not only techniques to understand that, but also really challenging their soft skills. Again, the third step really involves the fellow to provide a range of support resources for people and help them collaborate. They use a lot of their digital and AI capabilities to do that and provide easy access on a global platform. And then, of course, there's always executing the plan where there is continued collaboration, increase of that. And then, of course, looking at the performance. I appreciated what Heather says, because I think all of this has to be grounded in process and performance and really understanding how it ties back into the overall business and what the business is trying to achieve. One more quick thing I want to touch on, and it's been touched on already. So that's a little bit about the expertise and understanding that cycle of learners, contributors, and experts. The other thing I want to talk about just very quickly is the skills for the future. And we do a lot of research in this in our human capital management space, as well as our knowledge management. And so I think one of the things, the rule of thumb, if it's a repetitive and high volume task, people start seeing that as busy work. No one wants to do busy work anymore. And typically that is where the computer, we can leverage our AI to do with 80% accuracy, probably more than that. I'm not a tech person, but probably more than that, but to take it the final mile then with the expertise and use the experts then for novel problems with no known answers. So when you take that busy work out, you are left with those two ends of the spectrum, the deep work, which I think involves that creativity and innovation we're looking for, the opportunity for design thinking, really thinking about the end user and not just the short-sightedness of it all. And then there's the social work. And one of the things I'd like to part out, and Paul talked a little bit about this, is in that ecosystem. I think the ability in terms of building expertise is to really understand and manage your partnerships. because I think he's right. You can't know everything anymore. You've got to rely not only on the bots to do it all for you, but to also rely on your partnerships to bring that to the table in a collaborative way. And so I think there's all the traditional, I know from a knowledge management perspective, there's the traditional partnerships where we want to partner with our IT and digital, our colleagues, process and quality, learning. There's the business groups, obviously, that are important. But then there's the non-traditional, which gets you into more innovation teams, new ventures, hubs, startups, the digital disruption that we see continuing to take place. Data and analytics is another one. So really understanding those partnerships and how you can build those pipes or those channels into building that expertise that starts expanding that ecosystem. So that's Jim. That's really my comments, Jim. I'll take any questions or comments.
We'll wait for the Q&A for the questions because you're a little over the
I'm
time.
sorry.
No worries, no worries. We'll just shift it to the general Q&A. But thanks, Cindy. Great points. I put some of them in the side, and I have a few questions for you. I'd like to have our next panelist, Alexandra Medina Borja, who is a program manager at National Science Foundation, bridging both education and engineering, and in a variety of roles that really give her great insights into the future of expertise. So Alex, over to you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Let me just share my screen. Okay, I hope everybody can see it. Okay, so thank you. So I come here with the perspective from the National Science Foundation, which is a government entity, as many of you may know. You know, we have been preoccupied with the future of work and the future of education, STEM education in particular, but in general of the higher education system for a long time now, for several years. The first thing that we did, okay, let me make sure that I can move the slides because I don't see them moving.
Yeah, we see the first one, Alex, but.
Okay, it's probably here. Okay, so the first thing we did several years back, around 2016, is we created a program, a research program, the Future of Work at the Human Technology Frontier, to fund the fundamental research in what we call 3 rings that were very similar to what Heather was showing us, which is the future work, future worker, and the 3rd ring is a little different. We want to fund research on future technology. And this is really not for the present, so it's not technologies that are being developed by industry today, but really looking at the future. And so that's our research contribution, and what in 2016 was called one of the 10 big ideas for future investment. So in the worker space, we, among other things like the human factors, the interaction with the technology, we also like to fund research on how to train these adult workers with future skills and to interact with the technology. So that's one of the aspects. Then we're also preoccupied, as I said, with the future of education. So the preparation of those experts of the future starts in college, and or even before that in the traditional way. And so in 2018, or around that time, in a pre-pandemic world, we partnered with the national academies for one side to start asking questions about the future of STEM education. And then in parallel, the Directorate for Education asked its advisory committee to start putting together a report that will give advice to us on what is the future of education. And as part of that, I was the executive secretary for that. This group of experts and a lot of visionaries and innovative institutions gave us advice, and they decided to actually put together just a visioning report. And this is the link for the visioning report, as opposed to provide other type of advice. So today I'm going to talk a little bit what this visioning report talks about in terms of the future skills or the future competencies that will be required. And again, we force ourselves to be really futuristic, So not things of today, but things in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And so there is this, let me just move something here so that I can see the screen. So this is, I want to start with what was the vision that was put together in page 25 of this report. It says, in the future, there will be a demand for humans to do work that machines cannot do or cannot do as well as humans can. Being able to think critically, reason probabilistically, and exercise logical discerning judgment will be some of the most important human competencies. We must cultivate these qualities in young people and retool adult learners to master them as well. How we harness cognitive and emotional mechanisms to infuse an attitude of self-motivation and self-actualization in young people and adults will be the key to our ability to adapt to the new jobs of the future. So here, there's nothing new. You know, all my colleagues before me just exactly talk about that. I need now to contextualize this report in the US situation. I see that some of the participants are international, and so I just wanted to situate, you know, that the NSF report in the US situation. One of the things that is really important to know is that many Americans, from the government point of view, are entering the workforce without a basic grasp of STEM facts. The reasons are many, and people in the United States will know that starting in high school or before. That also brings us to a stagnant or even dipping number of US-born STEM workers. That is a concern for us. In particular, there are certain groups, you know, women, people with disabilities, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, who remain you know, dramatically underrepresented in STEM. And the government believes that that will really harm the strategic progress in certain very important areas for the country. The other part that is important to understand about the United States is that the pathways to attain an undergraduate degree or competencies that will be required to be an expert in the future are changing dramatically. When I mean pathways is the number of 18-year-olds that enter the first year of college, as it used to be, is being reduced for many reasons. Many work first, many go to a community college first, and then they may or may not enter as a transfer the university. And some others just restart their careers at an older age. So the population of learners is continuing to shift, and we have more and more adults that require retooling and upskilling, as others have said already, so that they are able to participate in this workforce of the future. So this is this US situation. This is what concerns the government. The National Science Board then, in its Vision 2030, the National Science Board is the organism that oversees NSF. One of the important points of its vision for 2030 is what they call the missing millions, and refers to all these Americans who will not participate of the innovation economy unless we have a real change. The majority of high-tech workers today were not born in the United States, and that's a real concern. So those are the missing millions. And so that takes me to acquiring these 21st century competencies. And it's exactly what others said. We need to, you know, think about learners that are not only young adults, but, you know, in all the spectrum of life. And regardless of their educational pathway, they need all of them, the ability to adapt, to be flexible, to work collaboratively, to learn independently, and to be lifelong learners, because we know technology is changing every day. So they need to really be able to upskill themselves. There is no such a thing as this is the basic knowledge that you will need and will serve you well until retirement. That you know, it is not the reality today. The other thing that for us is something that the educational system in the United States needs to consider is disruptions like the credentialing movement. And you know, this is really replacing the need for diplomas and formal education with more competency-based skills that are, you know, credentialed by some other entity that may or may not be a university. So that those are things that are happening. And I believe this is my final slide. It's, you know, the report also gives some actions that we need to consider. Of course, you know, being an SF for us is really important about what is the research that is needed and what are the educational actions that are needed so that we can move all this population and make that all Americans participate in this STEM enterprise. And so the first thing is we need to understand how people learn STEM concepts, computational thinking and systems thinking at different points in their life. We also must understand how to instill flexibility, creativity, teamwork, problem solving, and communication skills, as others have said. We must examine the current academic structures and see, you know, if, you know, the brick and mortar university may need to update itself a lot so that they can respond to the needs of current and future students. And we need to adapt the education system to different phases of life. And that means across the lifespan. And I believe that's my last slide.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. Perfect 10 minutes. And now we are, let me ask you just one quick question before we move to the general Q&A. And for the general Q&A, what I'd like to do is have the panelists ask each other questions first, if you have any questions for each other. And then please, others, start putting your questions into the Zoom. And Alex, you talked about, you know, the NSF is funding research in all of these important areas, human technology, areas for advanced technologies, and very exciting stuff going on there. Funding, helping the diversity of the workforce, including those with disabilities, those who are underrepresented, you know, systems trying to address all of these social challenges. And then you also talked about the NSF investing in reports like these future skill reports that kind of give us, you know, an assessment of this highly dynamic area where credentialing is changing. And we know that's important to expertise because that's got to be legitimized. I'm just wondering, you know, you've seen a lot over the years at NSF. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like all of that investment has, where do you see the impact happening in this area? Is it through just the increasing knowledge, or do you see like industry picking up stuff, or do you see, how do you see the impact? I'm just curious if I could ask that question.
Yeah, so as you know, you probably have read, you know, really science and you know, innovation. I think innovation based on fundamental science is really a complex system, right? We fund things that may not, you know, see the light in their form, but eventually someone else many years later will come back to that and use it for something, to build a system that is completely different. So there is not a straight line from fundamental research funding to actually see the commercialization. But we try to have, you know, right now, one of the things that is happening is in the last 35 years, NSF had never had a new directorate. And now with this, in this fiscal year, we open a new directorate, the TIP, the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate. So whatever was in engineering before in the IIP division, right now is a new directorate with new funding. And their mission is to actually translate from fundamental research to, you know, to eventually commercialization, but at least translation to practice and to scale up some of these innovations. So so we have, for example, within the same Future of Work program, we have a translation to scale part in which we say, you know, if you have a fundamental research discovery that you think is ready for scaling up, we can give you a little bit more of funding than the regular award. But even with those, I think that while the future of work requires that they really implement technologies in a work context that are real, we still need to see where that is going. I think that the most important contribution is probably this acknowledgement of the research community that the human worker is a very important component. Then there is this partnership, and what we really want to do is we fund projects that do not replace the human worker, but adapt in some way the role so that the human worker has a role with technology in a partnership. I think that's probably the overall contribution of this program at NSF.
Great. Thanks, Alex. And I want to pay you a really big compliment because I follow NSF carefully, and I see you as the moving force behind so many of the programs that are really trying to reach this transdisciplinary goal that it's, you need the social sciences, you need the business, you need the engineering all to come together. And I know it must be an incredible headache for you to try to find reviewers for these proposals, because who knows the business and the social and the technical and can review these things. But I see you as really the prime mover behind so many amazing NSF programs that are getting us towards this ability to solve problems outside of a disciplinary silo. And that's really important work. So thanks for leading that at NSF, Alex. I know you do a great job there. So now for the panelists to ask each other questions. So I'll create some space for that while I look at the chat for questions that are going in the chat. So Heather, Cindy, Alex, feel free to ask each other questions.
Yes, so I have a question, and it really is to anyone. Heather, you may want to start out. Do you all do anything using AI or processes on anticipatory knowledge delivery, just making sure? So short example, you got a new project manager, not a lot of experience, and you're going to hand them everything they need to know, plus mentors to go that. Are you all doing anything like that?
Nothing quite that advanced at this point, Cindy, but definitely early versions of that. And
Good.
so with the Unlocked platform, it really is as people are coming into new roles or seeing, the skills that they have today. We do have some comparison that will be coming in with a new module that we're about to roll out, which is looking at, what are the skills, expertise, knowledge that we have for people in these roles in Mastercard, what's trending up, what's hot, what is actually trending down, that we're seeing fewer and fewer people with those particular areas of expertise, and then also comparing that to seeing what's happening in industry. Yeah. And so with all, being able to see a little bit of that, and then, what we're expecting over time is that if we get this right, Mastercard should be able to see the direction that we need to go before we see it in industry, just based on having that immediate access to the skills that people are self-claiming, and that what we're seeing coming up on job descriptions. So being able to have a holistic view of all of those pieces is starting to give us some initial insights, and that should continue over time. The other piece with that is that we are leveraging the AI then to recommend additional learnings that will be coming into their development plans over time. So yeah, really, really, really early days, but that is the vision that we have for where we want to get to.
It's a great vision, Heather. Thank you.
Yeah, Heather, I also, from the, you have been in so many companies. Do you see the same as we see the data? We only see the data from NSF, from the National Science Board and other sources. But do you see in reality, in practice, what we see in the data? So the fact that Americans seem to be less prepared for high technology jobs than foreign, workers.
I can't say that we've seen that in the data that we've looked at. We haven't really been digging deep on location specific skills in that way to say, hey, are we seeing, more gaps in one area versus another, which, kind of back to Jim's earlier point is why these partnerships are so critical so that we can see, what are you seeing outside, or what's the research saying, is that applicable internally at the organization as well?
Okay.
Great, great. Any other questions for each other? I have skimmed the chat and I found a couple threads that I think are especially interesting. Kazu, our colleague from Japan Science and Technology, is asking some very provocative questions about the societal context that we see developing in the world. And I'm just wondering, as we look at the future of expertise and maybe some of the disparities that are developing, and you know, Heather, I know you feel strongly that you know, good industry examples are going to be helpful, and maybe even at a societal level. But Alex, I guess the question would be, you know, the institutional change in government. NSF is very, very forward looking, but there's a lot of other institutions in government maybe that aren't moving so rapidly. And I guess the question, and I'll make this the question to Cindy, but you know, then I'll ask Heather and Alex if they have comments. So Cindy, APQC, do you have any government organizations that are trying to improve their productivity and quality? Are they members of APQC?
We actually do, Jim. We've even recognized some. They fall under the banner of excellence in knowledge management. So I was asking Heather about anticipatory delivery. MITRE, who does research for the DoD, is actually doing a really good job using AI and processes. Heather, they would say like you, they're still in the early stages, but what I can see, they've really developed some good personas to help deliver what people need to know. And they've got a great way to get that expertise out that then some can be documented. And what it does, Jim, I think people are so overwhelmed with the amount of information and tasks they have to do right now, that's why everybody wants to build expertise fast and accelerate it all. And I think if we can, you know, knowledge isn't power unless you can find it, right? And so we're just still seeing some very basic things going on in terms of using the new digital capabilities. And I say new, I know I'll have a lot on here arguing they're not new, and I agree, but how they're being applied in many organizations is fairly new. We tend to move slow, especially in the US government agencies. But yeah, we do, Jim. They're doing a good job. We have some military institutions that are doing some really good forward-looking things in the Navy, Central Command. They have some good things going on. It's just, it's very, it's a federated model, right? You don't see any holistic thing going on, really. Yeah. That's what I see.
Thank you. Heather, any thoughts on this issue of, I'll just to reframe it, it's like, so yeah, we see productivity and quality improvements being invested in the industry. Mastercard example was a great one. I've certainly seen it at IBM and other organizations. NSF is pioneering a lot of the higher education investment change, but Kazuyoshi's question from Japan Science and Technology is, do we see, you know, any expertise changes in the higher levels of government institutions, I think, and that's a fascinating question. And are there any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak to what, you know, what's happening within the government organizations, but you know, I will definitely say that, you know, what I've seen over you know, over the past, let's say 5 years, if you take a particular snapshot of time in my career, in those 5 years, there were 3 different organizations that I worked at Cisco, at Facebook, now Meta, and now at Mastercard. And within that period of time, one of the things I have absolutely seen is a shift in what is being required of leadership and the way that they now need to show up for their employees. So as we start moving towards a far more employee-centric world, knowing that like this is the engine, recognizing this is the engine of productivity, you start moving so far away from hierarchy and much more into this flatness. And, everyone has a role, everyone has a job. And as a people leader, the skills and expertise that are needed become much more around like the philosophy of servant leadership. So what do I do to help support you? How do I coach you? How do I remove blockers? How do I become the connection as a network into other leaders to ensure that we're all moving in the same direction? Those shifts have been very, very real. And I have seen a lot of difficulty, quite frankly, in people that have stayed working inside of their, let's say like their generational network, because there's a set of beliefs and a set of understanding how the world works and the context around it and ways of working within given groups that over time has shifted radically. And so if we have people, say from like Gen X or boomer generations that have not directly worked a lot with millennials or Gen Z that are now making up vast majorities of the workforce, there can be a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of context missing in how you need to show up as a people leader in a way that's supportive and meaningful for people that are now very, very relevant and driving a lot of the workforce.
Thank you. And Alex, any thoughts on that? I realize it's a bigger question about, we see expertise development in industry, we see future of expertise development in the universities as they're trying to adjust. What about the larger societal institutions, as what our colleague from Japan Science and Technology was asking about? Do we see any world-class efforts anywhere in the world? I mean, it seems like NSF would be looking not just at the US institutions, but globally.
Yeah, so what I see, I think, is more social conscious in general. So this is experts and leaders who are more aware of society, and also this interest on creativity. So slowly, as Heather said, as the new generations are getting to the top, so there are changes as well, and some changes are positive and some maybe not as positive. But there is some movement. The thing is that usually government entities are not known for having young people at the top, right? And so as those retire, I think that there will be definitely changes.
Thanks, Alex. And we have just 3 minutes left before the break. We'll take a 10-minute break and then go into the next panel. But in the last 3 minutes, I just want to kind of summarize a little bit of what we heard. I know some people have come in and out, but we are just delighted that this ISSIP online event on this most amazing topic of the future of expertise has allowed us to start looking at some diverse perspectives, and we'll certainly get more in the next panel. Utpal, in his opening comments, he's a general manager at IBM in our Edge Cloud area, and also the VP of ISSIP, really sees the T-shaped model evolving and a lot of the future of expertise having to do more with ecosystems and platforms than it has in the past. And I think his perspective resonates true for me. And then we heard from Heather about this amazing, who is the Vice President of Talent at Mastercard and also a former ISSIP president. We heard of several different aspects of how seriously Mastercard is taking their internal expertise development, and we heard about this unlocked marketplace, which is fascinating. And then from Cindy at APQC, we heard about knowledge management from many different perspectives, and APQC, if you don't know, is this amazing benchmarking organization, and IBM's partnered with them for years on various tools that we use internally for benchmarking. And then Alex talked about the government investments and different areas that National Science Foundation is moving in. And I liked your answer to one of my questions, Alex. I see things that NSF invested in when I was, a grad student, over 40 years ago, that are just now paying off in big ways in science. So I totally am happy that we have a system in place in the US and the National Science Foundation to fund those long-term things that have huge impact in the future, but take decades sometimes to come about. So we're about 1 minute away from the break, so please do take a little break, relax, stretch. We'll be back in 10 minutes at the bottom of the hour with the second panel, and you don't want to miss it. Thanks, everyone. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Jim.
So I forgot to put up the break image
Yes.
while we were relaxing and refreshing and recharging.
Very
And I see we have Haluk, our first panelist. So great. Haluk, looking forward to your comments.
That's a
Sure.
great tee up in the chat
Oh,
there.
I
Oh,
think
yeah. Mhm.
I have a little bit more time, right, for my presentation.
Yeah, you definitely.
Okay. I was like, oh, did I miss up the schedule?
No,
Yeah, I've been listening. So this has been going excellent.
yeah, we'll get started in 2 minutes, I guess, and then I'll have a little preliminary and then switch it over to you, Haluk, followed by Yasi, and then Terry and Rodrigo.
Yeah.
And I'm just scanning the chat right now.
And I can provide more context what I talk about, but I've never thought we have this much gap, academia versus industry. And it is actually exciting, and it's also sad. And that's why I'm like, oh my God, how are we going to close this gap? Because gap is growing exponentially.
You are in the position to know.
Oh my God, I honestly don't know what to say. It's just been scary, actually.
Yeah.
I'm more scared. I'm more scared than anything else, because what we are producing in academia is not ready at all. I'm sure our industry colleagues are seeing that when they hire a new graduate.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know.
Opportunity.
It is. Yeah, there's so much of a gap, and it seems to be widening in many places. But there's also some cause for hope.
Hi, Haluk, it's Larry Heiner. How you doing?
Good.
Been a long time since we talked.
Yeah, for some time.
Discovery Summit a few years ago. I posted the question back to you. I was wondering,
Sure. I will provide. I didn't want to take
Yeah.
too much time, but yeah, I will provide more information, because I think academia, we are too much time maybe spending time on knowledge. I think we may need to spend more time on skills. Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges, I think, especially in the United States higher education system. Like, what I mean is we deliver so much knowledge, a lot of book knowledge, but again, there's application of knowledge is lacking, I think, and also application of skills is lacking. Like, that's my observation, but I can give some more specific examples. I don't want to.
Very, very soon.
Love
So
to talk to you about that some more. Thanks.
welcome back, everyone. And this is Jim Sporer, moderator for the second panel. And I'm really excited that we have, again, for very exciting, very diverse, just like we saw from industry and nonprofit and government. On the first panel, we're going to hear more from industry, more from academia on this panel. And Haluk Demirkan from Amazon will be our first panelist. Haluk is one of these professors types who went over to industry, so that's going to be a unique perspective. Second, and I should mention Haluk is also on the board of directors of ISSIP. Thank you, Haluk, for that service. And next we will have Yasi Mogadam, who is the executive director, former executive director of ISSIP, and now the executive director at UC Santa Cruz, Silicon Valley, HCI, Human Computer Interaction master's program, and has completed some recent work with the National Science Foundation and industry and academia, looking at the future of skills, and that from a research perspective. So that'll be interesting from Yasi. Then Terry Griffith is our ISSIP president, who's the leader of the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Center at Simon Fraser University up in Vancouver, Canada, and author and speaker on a lot of topics around management expertise. And then last but not least, and I actually saved Rodrigo from last because Rodrigo Ribeiro from Brazil, the university there, is truly an expert on expertise. This is what he studies from a social science, industrial and systems engineering perspective, philosophical perspectives. He's worked with some of the top names in the study of expertise in the world, including Harry Collins and as well as Dreyfus at Berkeley. So I thought, it would be interesting to get the industry perspectives, the academic perspectives, how we think about skills and expertise kind of intermixed in various ways, and then end with Rodrigo's perspective and his colleague, Davide Nicolini, who suggested Rodrigo, and thank you, Davide, is also on, and perhaps, Davide, if you think is appropriate at the end, you could share some of your thinking from the scholarly perspective as well, your studies of case studies on expertise. So we have a very exciting panel. And I just want to say that, we've been exploring a lot of themes today around expertise, and maybe we haven't hit the AI digital twin stuff as much as yet as we could, but I think, Rodrigo has some perspective on that as well, which I very much agree with. I think AI is a little overhyped in its ability to do certain things, so we may be hearing from that. But without further ado, Haluk, I'd like to just ask you if you would bring up your slides and share your perspective on the future of expertise with us.
Sure, I will share my slides quickly. First of all, Jim, thank you so much for organizing this event, and I really appreciate for the invitation, and this is so exciting actually. Okay. So can you all see my slides? Yes, perfect. So again, thank you for the invitation. Quick background of myself. I am as I mentioned in the chat, I have been in the United States since 1991, and I spent about 12 years in industry in the United States, worked in various roles, started as a software development engineer, AT&T, Bell Labs, Citibank, MicroStrategy, and then when I was working full-time, I did my PhD and joined academia. And after that, I spent almost 19 years in academia at Arizona State University and University of Washington as a professor. And even when I was in academia, I felt like I was still interacting with industry and industry projects a lot. I mean, every summer I actually did consulting and as much interaction possible. And then this year, I took a leave from University of Washington and joined Amazon. And like I said, I noticed the gap is way more bigger than what I expected. But I want to come back to my slides. So I will go through my slides quickly so we can have a discussion during my presentation or at the end. But we all know AI is coming, technology is coming. There's no question. And when I show these pictures, actually, it looks like extremely easy. Yes, there's a car, for example, Google has an autonomous car, but who knows how many years it took to develop that car, right? Processes, technology, software solutions, or some of these, drones, or some of the other AI technologies. It takes years to develop these solutions. And also the complexity is also so big to build these solutions. And the amount of people involved to design, develop is also a lot. And in the meantime, we've been talking about these technologies are growing exponentially, coming to the world, and we might start using them more comprehensively. That is true. These solutions are actually very smart, right? They can read, analyze, understand, maybe even react data much faster than most of us as a human. And then there's also, we can see the application of this artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, or smart technologies in almost every industry today. There are samples around in just solving some simple problems, or agricultural decisions, doing some design solutions. There's about in medicine, it's a huge application of AI solutions. Automotive driving is a big thing. Or even most of the home office operations are driven and enabled by these technologies. So I wanted to bring the conversation to the three different pieces. One, these technologies come into our life, and I don't think we have a choice. We will start using more and more every day. That's a one piece. Other piece, it takes years and very long time to build these solutions, right? So in that context, I think from the future of expertise, we might be in one of these two groups. One group of people who uses these solutions in our daily life or our work, or other group who builds these solutions for others to use. Kind of, we might be in one of these two buckets in the future, right? So from that perspective, I also wanted to kind of bring up some of the challenges with these technologies. These technologies are still having issues about personality, trust, creativity, empathy, compassion, sympathy. All those characteristics come from human, I guess, knowledge or background or expertise, right? So from that, when these technologies are growing exponentially and becoming part of our life, again, they are still lacking these things in them. So I think that will be one of the major differentiation between augmentation versus automation. So I actually talked to a number of companies. Most of the executives in corporations, they are saying, oh, how can I use these technologies to reduce my operational cost, right? That is the most common application of these technologies. So how can I use these technologies to reduce some of my headcount or increase automation and do things much faster, easier, cheaper than today, which I think there's a challenge. Some of them might have this taking a risk of this offshore outsourcing pattern we have seen many years ago. Many years ago, one of my PhD research paper was about offshore outsourcing. And I think most of us remember the days some companies said, oh, I can reduce all my costs just by offshoring. And then after a certain point, they just lost their competitive advantage. And some of them actually disappeared because of too much offshoring their capabilities to the outside. So that might be a similar challenge with this automation versus augmentation context. So one of my suggestions, I've been talking to the organization saying that don't think about just reducing the cost with 100% automation. Think about augmentation. How can you augment people with these technologies to increase people's capabilities to doing the things? So that's why I said right balance between these computing horsepower versus human skills are, I think, very important. That's a one point I wanted to raise. Other one is I really think data is the biggest player in any of these technologies. I think data is the biggest enabler, and we all know that. Even we have been working on this data solutions, who knows, 30 years probably, but it is still so complex to collect, integrate, clean, and make the data useful in these technologies. I think more than 50% of the time is spent for the data side than the technology, writing the code for these applications, in my experience. So that's why I brought this up. Data is extremely important, these technologies, data information. And then I wanted to bring to the people. So people side, again, we might become a person who uses these technologies in our daily life or work, or we might become a part of a team or organization who builds these solutions to a life. So in this case, I personally think for, again, some of the panels already mentioned earlier, that the continuous learning is extremely important. And I remember many years ago when I talked to Jim also made a comment saying, hey, we need to learn and we need to also figure out how to unlearn, because there's always a capacity issue in our brain. right? And I feel that way personally sometimes. Sometimes I feel like my brain is too full. And then very simple things, it takes so much time to get to understand the new simple things. So other one is about, I think, heavily is about agility. I really think agility is a very, very, very big important thing for the new future of expertise. How quickly we learn, adapt, and become a part of a new thing. I think agility is extremely new thing. I guess destroying the silos. So each of us might become more like a agent. I'm thinking in the new corporate world, maybe agent who provides some service capabilities. And then I agree with Heather earlier. She mentioned they've been trying this pair development, but I personally think we may also need to get into the rotation approach with the people who can play multiple skill sets, because there are some companies out there actually in retail industry, they have a very low attrition rate. And I asked a couple of the people why. They said the biggest thing is they rotate almost every job. Anybody in the company can rotate in a position in a certain place. That gives them additional challenges and additional, I guess that also pulls us out of the complacency issue, which happens sometimes. So, and then I have a couple slides with the new skill sets we may need in this world to play in our, especially for the corporate world, like business domain strategist skills is a pretty common thing, process skills, management skills, but I also have some specific skills in context of building these solutions or increasing the adoption of these solutions, specific to ML learning, human-computer interaction. And yeah, I wanted to be on my time. Any questions, comments? I thought I can have more time for
Thank you, Haluk. You just 8 minutes, so we have time for a couple quick questions. I think that was the point you made.
Perfect. It's a mistake I did. I forgot to look at my watch. So I was like, oh, I'm running late.
No, you're right. You're early.
But just as a follow-up from the gap part, from academia and industry, I personally think things are moving so fast in corporate world, and in higher education, the pace of education change is extremely slow right now. That's one of the problems, I think. I mean, I remember most universities I've been, it takes a year to just to design a new master's degree. It takes another year to put a new course, brand new course to the curriculum. And in that time frame, oh my God, that content already changed. So most of my courses I teach at university, I don't use actual course books because usually they are 2 years behind today. So, which again is a, pros and cons of the situation, but I don't know if anyone else have a comment or questions.
Yeah, I think, Haluk, a question for you is, now you stepped from, I mean, you were in industry, then you stepped into academia, made contributions there. Now, recently you stepped back into very, very high-paced industry at Amazon in their, science of demand forecasting, and at a time when, the COVID thing was happening. So talent and all the ways of working are shifting and adapting. So very, very turbulent time. And therefore the perception that the gap is widening is especially clear to you. I'm just wondering, Haluk, if you think about the, and then you made points about AI, is coming along little by little, but there's still a lot of challenges. And so you're thinking the augmentation approach, maybe the best approach. I'm wondering if you, and I'm just looking at some of the questions that are coming in. Do you think it's going to be the case that burnout is going to become, more prevalent, or do you think that, this rotation thing might solve burnout, or how do you see this stress factor of work? It sounds like there's more stress.
I think there's more stress factor. That's true. I think it also depends on how the economy will go, right? I think people are okay to handle some of the stress currently because of the current pay scale. I think especially in technology companies, but for a period of time, I will say for a short period of time, because I noticed more and more, Jim, like you said, I have actually at least 3 or 4 friends from IT industry. They said, oh, I'm just taking off 1 year because they can afford it right now, but they got burned out, like you said. And then they are planning to come back to workforce after a year, but they can afford now, right? But if the economy, I think, changes in a few years, that's going to be different, right? People may not be able to afford to take those breaks, I think, when they get stressed out.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I think there will be, I think, some challenge for some big companies how to manage that speed of change.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Right. Otherwise, they are not going to have anyone to work in the company. They're going to lose everybody.
Yeah, let's shift over to Yassi. Thanks so much,
Sure.
Haluk. So Yassi, if you want to bring up your slides, and again, Yassi Mogadam is at UC Santa Cruz, Silicon Valley, the executive director of their HCI program, and has recently completed some future of skills work with industry and academia research project.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. I'm really delighted to be here. This is my first time being in one of these Discovery Summits as only a speaker. I know how hard it is to put one of these together. And I really want to commend Jim and Michelle for pulling this fantastic session. And really great to see some familiar faces, Heather, Haluk, Alex, Utpal earlier, and many of other ones as participants. So great to be here. So today I'll be sharing with you a perspective, a research perspective that basically reflects industry's perspective on future of skills and expertise. And this research was funded by the National Science Foundation. You heard from Alexander Medina Borja earlier, who really has, with her leadership, has driven several programs that is focused on closing the gap between education and employment. Then I also want to acknowledge ISSIP, that was the leading organization for the research that we did. And I want to acknowledge my team members. Haluk was one of the co-PIs on this project, and then Lou Frond from San Jose State University, Martha Russell from Stanford, and Josephine Ewan, formerly with UC Berkeley, and a volunteer at ISSIP when she was involved in this. So, so just to tell you about the project, this project was funded out of the Improving Undergraduate Education Program as part of some of the programs that Alex actually discussed earlier. And the goal of the project was to inform academic leaders on industry perspective, on jobs of the future, STEM jobs of the future. And so we did actually 2 research projects. One started in 2019, and then we went back and examined our findings in 2021 in light of impact of COVID. And then we also looked at how industry and academia are closing the gap. We heard a lot from academia being very slow, and industry really needing urgency. So we looked at that and what are some of the educational institutions that are actually leading the pack. And then we looked at what is the role of micro learning and macro credential in developing future expertise. Our research basically included surveying 95 experts, and these experts were either hiring managers or had visibility into HR strategy, workforce development, and future directions of expertise, and had an expert panel of 31. We held 4 workshops, and then picked the brain of 26 expert speakers. And we did that across a range of industries, and I'm not going to read that off to you, but a lot of, to Utpal's point, it was important that we get perspective from multiple industries. So we came up with a framework for future of expertise that included skills for sure. Also, it included mindsets, and also it included that everybody's voices needed to be heard, and the future of expertise needed to be equitable. So on the skills side, we looked at basically 2 categories of skills. The skills that industry told us is in demand in the future could be divided into 2 categories of skills: specialized skills and foundational skills. And then foundational skills were further subdivided into soft skills and work practice skills. And you heard from earlier speakers on these various type of skills. And what you actually see in black text was what we came up in 2019, and what you see in red text is what we gathered in 2021. And the 2021 findings was really how the long-term impact of COVID-19 has impacted our earlier findings. So, and in a lot of skills that you see, I'm not going to read off all the details, but the important things is actually they capture the bigger trends that our earlier speakers told us. And so specialized skills are the ones that are changing constantly. Certainly the list isn't exhaustive, but as a result of COVID, some of the need for these skills have been really accelerated. So the need for AR, VR, AI, natural language processing, computer vision, working with robots, social networking analysis, all of us being online in various type of configurations. And also, again, partnering with machines, given that basically the long-lasting impact of COVID has been a hybrid distributed workforce. then on the foundational skills, there are work practice skills that are still specialized, but they can transfer from one industry to the other, from one job to the other. And again, on the work practice skills, the project management, agile, and a whole host of usual suspects. But then managing across culture after COVID-19 became a lot more urgent, and sourcing and managing hybrid distributed workplaces, and accomplishing missions online without the luxury of being together, and really some of the serendipity of innovation that in being in close proximity happens. And then on the soft skills, again, really being able to collaborate and function in hybrid distributed workplaces, knowing yourself, how you do work in those environments, and also as managers providing the opportunities for people to thrive in those type of environments. The other thing that we found is skill is one thing in the future of expertise, but mindset is as important. Having growth mindset that sets you up for lifelong learning in this changing world. Probabilistic thinking, really scientific thinking, fact-based thinking is really important. And we've all seen why it has become important over the last several years. And then given the complexity of our world, systems thinking is very important, not just for experts, but for not just for select few experts, but across disciplines and across industries, because we are all managing complex systems. And to that point, ecosystems and complex systems go hand in hand, and therefore design thinking, again, not only as deep expertise, but the kind of thinking that you basically ability to zoom in and zoom out for all workers is really important. And of course, service thinking, being able to co-create value with others. So the future of expertise basically depends on a really holistic approach to talent development, and our education system basically and higher education is in a great place to help students develop this and come prepared with these skills into the workforce, especially on the foundational skills. What we see is, and we heard earlier from Haluk and Alex, that our higher education system is heavily focused on knowledge development, not so much competency development. And what is really important, a shift in that, where a lot of the learning is applied, and that requires industry, academia partnerships and collaborations. And industry is very eager in doing that, but academia is slow. I happen to be in an academic institution and in a program that really encourages that. So I'm really happy about that. But I know that's far and in between. And the other parts of this research, really quickly, I'll touch on it, that I didn't go into it, is on micro learning. I didn't go to it in here, but in micro learning. And basically what we found was, micro learning and credentials is very early stage, and depending on how you speak with is, it's going to replace the whole higher education. I don't believe that, it's nothing really to worry about. I think there is a role for micro learning, and our industry experts actually echoed that. For specialized skills, micro learning is really great. For foundational skills, the kind of education that we get in universities actually is very conducive to that. So, that's something for higher education leaders to consider. So, this is basically what we found out, and glad to share it with you here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yassi. We'll circle back with some questions during the Q&A because we went a little bit over the 10 minutes, but thank you. And everything you have on that slide there, I can validate our issues at IBM. So thank you. So Terry, you're up next. Again, Terry's our ISSIP president and the head of the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Simon Fraser. Over to you, Terry.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. And Jim, I hope you're going to fund that center. We don't have one yet, but I am the Keith Beattie Chair in Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Simon Fraser University. And I am just displaying the gorgeousness that is the Vancouver area, although sadly, it is kind of a black and white day today. I'm very much looking forward to sharing with you maybe a more micro perspective on some of the things we've heard so far, but very much in keeping in the context. Upal starts us off talking about how expertise evolves. And I think expertise is evolving to help us do a better job thinking about how we work with our tools. And that's really going to be the main theme of my presentation. But Heather also talked about how in a large scale organizational sense, how we can support the organization and the workers within it and the ones who connect. I always try and say workers rather than employees, because so many of the different kinds of roles we have in organizations today, and I try and keep that top of mind. But we also heard from Alexandra about systems thinking, and again, very tightly tied to the perspectives I have here, and this employee-centric approach. Haluk also talked about some things that are relevant here in terms of the different kinds of skills, either skills in using the tools or skills in designing the tools that can help us all within our organizations. And then Yassi talking about this co-creation of value. And as I heard her say that, I thought really a lot of what I'm saying is a very individual, introspective approach, but you absolutely have to be doing that in the context of that co-creation. So what I will share today is a system savvy approach. So I think of system savvy as a skill that a person can have. And then thinking in 5T is how I generally think about how to teach into system savvy. So it's a particular form of expertise, and it comes from my own evolution and the evolution of my own expertise. In 1984, I started out thinking about telecommuting. So you can imagine this has been a kind of a resurgence of my interest in this area in the last few years. In the 90s, I was part of the teams looking at group decision support systems. And I always smile as I look at this particular room at the University of Arizona that cost in 1990s dollars well over $1 million. And what we can do today just with a Google Doc is very different. In the 2010s, I was working with Cisco Systems on really hybrid work and how you share expertise in that kind of a hybrid model. And then with DuPont about how you leverage technology to be able to bring technology to bear in your top innovation teams. But today it's more a focus on bottom-up applications of automations and other tools to help us craft our own work And where I say high skills, it's sort of, your skills in managing in your hybrid work environment, but all forms of work. How do we help that individual understand the technologies that are available to them and how best to integrate them into their own work? And, I go back to history to see how we've been able to do this over, eons. Blacksmiths often built their own tools, and they even build their own tools today. 3D printer operators. I know we have some of you in this group right now. Of course, you're going to build things to make your 3D printing operation even better with your 3D printing tools. But then in the rest of our work, and especially in our knowledge work, how do we build our tools? And are the organizations hiring us, or are they hiring us and our tools? And then how are we working in teams, given so much of our work is in a team kind of setting? How are we integrating those technology tools into our teamwork, and who has the most expertise at doing that effectively? Again, going back to Upal and how expertise has to evolve, maybe this wasn't a skill that everyone needed before, but now I think it really is. We're having to make so many different choices. But again, blacksmiths been doing it for eons. How can we leverage that kind of a skill set? And for those of you who maybe come from the more academic perspective on this, I am leveraging the ideas of socio-technical systems, so an idea that comes to us from the 1950s, but really isn't applied in a very explicit mode. Some people have those skills of linking social and technical aspects of their work, but I don't hear it used. And I think part of the issue is, unlike, say, Six Sigma or the 5 Ps, we haven't had good branding. And so I've been fairly happy with how rebranding the ideas of socio-technical systems with this phrase, a trope, we see in 3D, we need to think in 5T. And my Ts, I'm going to start with talent. I'm going to think about technology from anything from AI to a ZAX, which is a roofing tool. You had to find the Z tool out there. The techniques that we use, and again, that was where I was just really thinking hard about what Heather was saying about the different techniques that they were using at Mastercard, but all aligned towards the target and the times. And this is why I show it in this framework, all connected. Heather also mentioned balance, and I've been torn about the term balance for a long time. Balance seems to imply equality, and I know it doesn't have to. But in these instances, I think just keeping in mind, we may have different ways of working that are very much technologically focused. We can have ways of working that are very much focused in on the talent itself. There's always some component, though, of the other dimensions in the mix. And it's a mix, it's an integration, and definitely a balance, but don't think about it as everything is always equal. Everything is always unique. It's really the answer there. And I always share this picture. This is the baby toy. If you are in my network and someone has a baby, they get one of these. Everyone should know this skill forever. You have those wooden dowels, and then the black lines are elastic. And what that shows is how if one of those is talent, one of those is technology, one is technique, and I make an adjustment, they have to move in some way in relationship to the other. I can't just change one thing. I probably don't want to change everything all at once as well, but I want to be making those integrated changes. And I hopefully am going to be sort of short here so that we have some time to discuss these comments. But my top of mind topics right now are, how do I identify the amount of system savvy that someone has? How do I help people develop their system savvy? Is thinking in 5T an approach that is going to be the most effective strategy? How do system savvy or thinking in 5T support expertise in work crafting, in saying to ourselves, how can I make how I do my work better, both in terms of, right in my job, but also how I integrate that work with everyone else's? And then how can we link the bottom up and the top down to be most effective for our organizations? Currently, these are some projects that we either have in the proposal stage or have been funded, and so we're actively taking them on. Hybrid work, clearly a question that many organizations are working on today. We've also been able to track in pilot data that yes, if you can identify sort of cognitive complexity, the ability to think about multiple dimensions in your hybrid work, that people seem to have more positive sentiment about how they're working today. So those with that ability to think in a systems approach, it is actually helping them as far as we can tell from our data. And then we have a very early stage process project in place, thinking about teams and negotiation. And again, is it an individual technology connection and then that individual and their tools are part of the team and then they're doing their negotiation work? Or is that tool something that is shared across the team and that's how they go about their tasks? This is a thing I hope you'll find some value from. My RA and I keep track of AI-enabled capabilities that individuals or small teams can leverage on their own. So these are not connecting into the organization's databases. These are simply tools that someone could use in their own work. We update this quarterly, and that short link should always take you to the right place. And with that, I'm going to stop. And I think I do have a couple minutes here, and
Yes,
I hope we can get some early conversation.
Yes, absolutely, Terry. I love what you said about, are we being hired or are we and our tools being hired? And it makes me wonder, if I think of each academic discipline, what the tool is that is characteristic of that discipline. I mean, I guess it's easy when it's something like AI or computer science or data science, where there's specific technological tools, but your work in studying the different tools that individuals are using for productivity, I imagine it varies somewhat depending on whether the person is a manager or a senior executive, or whether they're in supply chain, or whether they're in some other part of the business. So I'm just wondering, Terry, that mapping of tools to both academic disciplines and roles and organizations, do you know of any good work on that?
You know, I wonder a little bit if that doesn't then silo us. So, you know, certainly as my RA and I are categorizing tools, we're siloing them. And we know that there are, you know, crossovers that aren't being identified there. We're using a very, I guess, constrained framework for showing those tools that are available. And when you first asked the question about the more academic context, I was thinking, well, people hire me not necessarily because of my hard technology, but certainly because of the frameworks I bring to bear. You know, I'm pretty explicit about the framework I'm going to come in and try and support someone with, or the frameworks that I'm offering up in class. And those are certainly a combination of technology and technique. Is that getting close to what you're thinking about?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll just come back one thing, and then we'll move to Rodrigo, and then after Rodrigo, we'll have the general Q&A. When I look at my smartphone, when I look at my Mac Airbook that I'm using right now, this is a bundle of tools, right? I mean, I'm using these bundles of tools, and I wonder what the role of AI will be in helping me use more and more tools better and better, and maybe being the integration point over tools. So what's the agent that helps us use more tools more effectively? Could be an interesting question. Thank you, Terry, very much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, keep the chat going, everyone. Panelists, you're free to answer all the questions that go into the chat. I'll just remind you, and not just the panelists, participants obviously can not only ask questions, but answer them. I think there's a lot of expertise and perspective to share here today. And that's really the point of these Discovery Summits, is to learn from each other. So Rodrigo, I am so delighted to meet you. I'm so excited that Davide and Nicole from the UK suggested that we invite you. It was a pleasure reading both your papers and multiple papers from you. And yeah, I'd love it if you could just share with us some of your prepared thoughts on the future of expertise.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good evening, Davide, and konbanwa, Shimada-san. The topic that I have chosen to discuss today is how to manage the tacit knowledge of employees or workers. And why is that? It's well known, as everybody said here, that experts work better, faster, and safer. But what does enable them to do to work like that, you know? And the answer is the tacit knowledge they have acquired through years of experience in specific areas. So if organizations want to the quality, the productivity, and the safety provided by expertise, they need to learn how to manage tacit knowledge. And this is why I brought up this topic for this meeting. So I will start by asking what exactly is tacit knowledge. And if we look at the traditional division, we are going to find, you know, on one side, what people call explicit knowledge, those being the, you know, the standard operational procedures, protocols, manuals, everything that can be put in a learning platform, as you have been discussing here, and also what can be inserted in you know, automated systems and in machines. On the other hand, you have tacit knowledge, which is, you know, the kind of knowledge that you acquire through experience, through immersion in a set of practices, and through socialization with other experts. So this is the traditional division you can find in the literature and also in Google and everywhere. Nevertheless, there are two major problems with this division. The first one is the idea that there is something like explicit knowledge. And the problem with explicit knowledge can be exemplified by the problem of the regress of rules. The regress of rules just say that the rules do not contain the rules for their own application. So if you think about what is inside a learning platform, the people can take that book knowledge with them, but they need the tacit knowledge in order to apply it to the context, the situation at hand. And so if you write a rule, you know, for someone to do something in the right way, this rule is subject to the regress of rules. Then you write a rule to explain how to use that rule. And of course, that rule does not contain the rules for their application. So you write the third one. And this leads you to the infinite regress of rules. This problem is beautifully quoted by this saying by G. Lave, that everything that you think is kind of explicit knowledge must be made specific to the situation at hand. So does this mean that you know, book knowledge or, you know, everything that is called explicit knowledge is not important? No, of course not. It is important. This is why I'm an academic and I write papers. But the point here is that this is insufficient. You know, as Michael Polanyi said, knowledge must rely on being tacitly understood and applied. And this means that you always need the tacit knowledge of people in order to apply the rules according to what the context asks for. So the second problem is that if tacit knowledge is so important, so, you know, are we talking about just one type of tacit knowledge? And actually what we have are three types of tacit knowledge that I'm not going to discuss here in details because of the time constraint. But the main point is that there are some types of tacit knowledge that can be elicited from people in order to write, you know, best practices and protocols and all of that. There is some part of the tacit knowledge that can be, you know, put into automation, transformed in algorithms, but not all of them. For instance, if you take a sensor in an automated system, the sensor detects something, it can measure something, but a sensor will never perceive something as humans, you know, do. So you can, you know, make something of this explicit, but it will always be subject to the regress of rules. If we are talking about, written things, or even if we are talking about automated systems. And the main thing that I would like to call the attention here is what Harry Collins called collective tacit knowledge, that is connected to the many types of judgments that are human judgments. And these types of judgments, we do not expect that any kind of artificial intelligence machines will be able to do in the future, even if in the future. So, but the main thing is that this kind of tacit knowledge allows humans to do things like to anticipate, to estimate, to prioritize. And because of the judgment of relevance and irrelevance that is underlying those activities, to perceive the right timing to do something or not to do something, a right timing to do something is not something that a machine will learn unless you build a micro word for the machine. But the right timing, as we use as humans, machines will not do. So the main point here is that there are many advantages of having expertise that is based on tacit knowledge. As we can, you have been already talking about that, so I'm not going to repeat everything that has been said. But the main point is that, like anticipation of problems from one single case, this is something that humans do, and it's very important for companies to anticipate problems, accidents, bugs, and all of that. And tacit knowledge is the only resource that does not depreciate. It's like wine, the older the better. So expertise and tacit knowledge are very important for what they enable, and of course for what they avoid, which is losses of all types, learning costs, rework, operational stoppages, and long ramp-up periods for capital projects. So expertise is very important. We all want expertise in our organizations. Tacit knowledge is the base of expertise, so we should do everything to increase the tacit knowledge of people. But tacit knowledge is not an easy thing to deal with. So tacit knowledge can never be all written down in rules or SOPs or automated systems. Experienced people have a hard time to explicate it. It's not easy to elicit tacit knowledge from people, because tacit knowledge is tacit even for those who possess the tacit knowledge. It's not an easy thing to do, to talk about what I know. It's easier to do things than to talk about how I do it. The other point is that tacit knowledge takes years to be developed, and it's in people's lived and embodied experience. So it's not something that you can transfer to another person. You cannot transfer tacit knowledge from one person to another. You can mentor, you can help people to speed up their learning curve, but you cannot transfer your tacit knowledge to other people, as we cannot do it with our children. So we have this whole socialization process in which we try to develop their tacit knowledge to face life as we have been facing. And finally, tacit knowledge is always rooted in specific practices. So if you have tacit knowledge acquired in the steel industry and you go to aviation and then you go to IT, you do not take your tacit knowledge in terms of the technical tacit knowledge into the other industry, unless there is some similarity between the industries. So because it is very important, but it's also hard, we have been studying how to manage tacit knowledge within organization for the last 15 years, more or less. And we developed 3 methodologies aiming at mapping expertise, so we can map individuals and teams' expertise within organization. On developing expertise, so it's a technique to actually speed up the learning curve of novices and level up the experience of the experienced people by eliciting the judgments that they make concerning the main activities or the more sensitive activities of their work. And the return on experience is like a participative project in which you can you use the tacit knowledge of people for improving the processes. So we have been using these methodologies operationally in the mining industry, in the steel industry, in the service industry, in the energy industry. Just to mention two of our projects, what you can see here in the screen is a picture of a $8 billion plant near the Amazon rainforest. When we arrived there in 2014, there were only 20 people hired. They had to hire another 2,000 people, more or less. And so all the selection, hiring, and team composition planning, and actually, the selection and hiring that happened afterwards was made by using our expertise mapping technology for future capital projects. So it was like a 3-year project. And then they started the plant in 2017, and the ramp up was perfect. And it's really difficult to make a ramp up of a $8 billion capex plant in a very remote area, and they did it. And part of it was the ability that this methodology enables to choose the person with the right expertise for the right role within all the roles that you can find in an industrial plant like this one. The expertise mapping was also used in the aviation industry. We had to map the software team for embedded software for both executive airplanes and military airplanes. At that moment, the Brazilian company was it was meant to join with Boeing, and some people would leave this Brazilian company for Boeing, and some other people would stay in the Brazilian company. And they wanted to map the expertise of those who were learning, who were leaving, and those who were staying, so they would see the gaps and prepare for the future. Of course, the merging didn't happen because of the problem that Boeing had exactly in this embedded software airplane. So the main thing that I would, summing up, this presentation, the point I want to make today is that if you want to discuss the future of expertise, you need to learn how to manage the tacit knowledge of your workers. Otherwise, it will not work as you may be planning. Some of the the experiences I had in the industry are in these in 2 papers and a chapter in this book. And if you have any difficulty to find them on the internet, you just can email me and I can send you the material. That's it. Thank you very much, Jim, for all the organization and the invitation.
Yeah, thank you, Rodrigo. And I hope people really do get a chance to, those who are interested in going deep, I really recommend that they read your papers, Rodrigo. And they were just hugely insightful, and things that I thought were one way, I now realize are another way. And I think that's what we want in these ISSIP Discovery Summits, is to take our assumptions and get them challenged, curious about challenging them. First of all, this is the talking part, but then I think oftentimes to really understand, we have to go deeper, and those papers of yours are just fantastic, as well as those of Davide. So let's do this. We've got 30 minutes remaining in this online event. And I would like to offer the opportunity for the panelists to ask each other questions. And so please feel free to and panelists from the morning session as well. Let's give the panelists an opportunity to ask each other questions, and then continue to put other questions in the Zoom, and then we'll open it up to anybody on the call can ask anybody questions. But panelists, any questions for each other?
If Heather is still on the line, this is Terry, and I've been dying to ask you, following the presentation you did, about, is there a willingness to allow what is described as work crafting, that the individuals would be finding new tools and adjusting their work and then figuring out from the bottom up how to integrate with the top-down practices that you described?
And I do not see Heather on the line, Terry, but that is a good question. So just to reframe it, it's is there a bottom-up effort? I know Yuri had asked me in a side chat, he said, what is bottom-up? And I think you just clarified that. So are the workers involved in the redesigning of the work? Is that your point, Terry? And
a willingness to allow them to be involved in the design of the work. Because I think anybody who's on this call understands that the tacit knowledge that Rodrigo was just talking about, the deep knowledge and expertise about the work itself is typically hosted in the person who's closest to the work. Now, you may not have the overarching perspective that you need to really refine it, but certainly that deep connection to the work comes from someone who's doing it. But many organizations are not so open to people individually crafting that work. And that's a lost opportunity, to be sure.
Anyone with thoughts on that? I see Rodrigo's got his hand up. Rodrigo, did you want to comment on that or something else?
Yes, I was a little bit, it's not a little bit surprised. I was like, people are talking about how things are changing so dynamically, as if we could not follow it. And, from my perspective, that always look at the work and to the activities, as nature does not make a jump, so it happens with work, you just don't make a jump from here to here, from, a balloon to a supersonic jet, you have to do it day by day. So I can see the problems with change, but if you look at the work, I would like to understand why people are so worried about changes. I can see this from a national government perspective, Alessandra, because everything is changing, so you have to prepare people for change. But within industries, I would like to hear a little bit more about that, because I work with industries all the time, and it's a day-by-day thing. It's not something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, that things are moving little by little in lots of places. I do know, when a company acquires another company, because I think Heather mentioned that a lot of the expertise they need, they sometimes bring in through acquisitions. IBM certainly did that. I think we were acquiring $100 million company per month for a while, almost for a whole decade. So those sometimes when those acquisitions happen, that was a big change for the acquired company. But you're right. It took a year or two before the integration was done. And it wasn't like instantly, I guess the most instant change is, maybe, if things aren't managed right, then, redundancy is developed and there's layoffs. That's the one thing that happens in industry that's pretty abrupt. People can find out 2 weeks before their job is going away. So that's that, but even that's 2 weeks, and oftentimes the severance is 3 months. And so there's time for adjustment. So I think your point is very well taken, Rodrigo, that, we talk about the accelerating change, but things happen little by little. Any other perspectives, either on what Terry mentioned or Rodrigo mentioned? I would like to put Davide on the spot if I could, because you put some amazingly interesting and nuanced things in the chat. And for those who don't know Davide Nicolini, he is coming off. There he is. I'll let you introduce yourself, Davide, and I'll just say that in Steve Vargo's Service Dominant Logic, that's when I first saw your name, because he was referencing you in terms of institutions and expertise. And if you don't know who Steve Vargo is, I'll send you some of his papers, but that I realized that's where I first learned about some of your work. So Davide, over to you.
So I think the quick way to introduce myself is I'm a friend of Rodrigo. We do most of the same things. I'm sitting very much in academia. I think Rodrigo is much more in between academic and industry, as you've seen. I deal with airplane, I deal with people. I think Jim wanted to just me to say something about the long post that I put in the chat. The conversation has been extremely interesting, but we've been sort of tossing around words a little bit. And the reason is that the conceptual distinctions I put in the chat is actually very consequential, in the sense that the future of skills, the future of competencies, of know-how, or what Rodrigo said, sort of like situated knowledge, and the future of experts, of expertise, are two different things that intersect with each other. I actually deal with attention lately, so that's another thing that could be in default, but we leave it out. And the reason is that some of this, especially given that a lot of people on the call are what we would call strategists rather than operational people, people from ISSIP, top managers in companies. So as an academic, all I can offer is a bit of clarity. So when we talk about skills, we're talking about a number of competencies that are ascribed and that we expect people to have. And skills are actually very much defined politically. In Europe, they used to be defined in collaboration between unions when they existed, and working and owners organizations. In Germany, still is like the case. And these are very much decided by committee. And there still are, okay? So people sit in the committee and they say, what are the skills that we need, what are the skills that people will do? But these are very, very important decisions, because as you know, as I put in my post, the concept of skills and ascribed skills distinguish people. So saying that somebody has hard skills, the soft skills is very much the evaluations of how much salary they will get. And saying that somebody is a skilled worker means they can go to certain places, they can apply for visa. So, and if they're not skilled, they will not apply. So skills are very important things that may or may not correspond to what Rodrigo was talking, that is actually also what the colleague from the IPQC has been talking about, which is developing competences, know-how, and let's see how we develop new one, how we share the one we have, how we will retain. One of the things that I think was only mentioned is that one of the major things that is facing most organizations we work in is actually knowledge retention, is that knowledge is running out of the door together with people who retired, exit the workforce, or go for someone else. And so that is more, if you want, the more traditional things about how companies can support learning, sharing. And this is what the colleague from the IPQC said, because it goes under the heading of knowledge management. But again, what is the future of this now that we have machines in our way is another different thing. So it's a different conversation. And the third conversation is, of course, when we're talking about who decides what is an expert, both the societal level, and you have had some very strong undercurrent about people refusing the institutional order as the legitimations of expertise. So you have to start to have expertise legitimated online, or experts delegitimated online. So this is what I think people picked up from my work, that I started to talk about how expertise is tied to, I use the word circuits rather than communities, because communities is a very loaded term. But the fact that who is an expert in expertise is increasingly generated by circuits of people, network, if you want, of people doing things in certain spheres, mostly digital. And this typology, this mapping changes very rapidly, but again, is increasingly important. But also, I was saying that sort of like who counts as an expert has a very practical, immediate implications, and you see that in my post, especially given that people are, as we heard, more or less in the thrall of the AI 2.0. Okay, because this is the second generations of AI, as we heard before, we heard the next. And the reason is that if we don't start to talk about these things openly and with sophistications, we leave these decisions to the engineers. So I said, in my university, in my circle, there's a lot of people who are actually looking at how engineers build the algorithms that we call machine learning. We just want to see how to do it. And I don't have time, and you don't hear this. Just the summary is that you will be horrified of the crass simplifications that people use, to put in the machine and then decide for our life. And most of these machines are of all of the algorithms are delegated to very small. I was not trying to be to single out, but of the 4 cases we're looking, 3, we discovered that UK banks are buying algorithms that are built by Chinese startups, where the engineers don't understand English. It's not so what I'm saying is that these are the people who are making the decision of who is skilled or not, while building the rules. And I can tell you that this is the end of my story, that as an engineer, when things become too complicated, they say, oh, this is too complicated. Okay, let's do just yes or no. So starting to discuss this has very practical implications if we want AI to succeed, because otherwise we end up like we ended up in the 80s. Okay, so that AI would not be helpful and people would just forget about it, which will be a great pity. End of the story. Sorry.
No, thank you, Davide. I think you've said it very clearly and concisely. And I think this is why this future of expertise is proving to be such a fascinating onion to peel. There's a lot of nuances to be understood. And it's critically important, as you said, to the future. So let's open it up. We have about 15 minutes left, and I'd love to hear from anyone on the call who would like to ask a question or offer an opinion or share something. I have a list of questions for people. I would like to call on ILIF, if you can come off mute, ILIF. And Larry, I'm going to call on you in a minute, but ILIF, are you there? You put a number of interesting comments into the chat. I don't know if you're able to come off mute or not.
Yeah, I am unmuted.
Very, very good. Hey, ILIF, good to see you.
Hi, Jim.
So give us your perspective on what we've been sharing, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, it's almost it's hard to know where to begin, because it's so complex, so many different things, and then that's why I think I probably went a little overboard when you asked me to send an email, because I am very much a believer in the big tent approach. Try to bring in some of the many aspects of this that influences it. And I have a long learning and training background. So I look at the learning, what is needed, how you could enable better, more effective learning, and particularly using all the tools that Terry and others have talked about. It's just overwhelming almost, the number of tools, the number of platforms that are now available. And when you talk about platforms, this is of course something that comes up increasingly often in discussions. And they talk about the platform economy and companies owning these huge platforms. And I mentioned in chat that I listened to a podcast just the other day that talked about Hire, which is a Chinese company that's developed a very impressive open platform for design, for collaboration, has a number of different modules available for anyone, apparently totally open for anyone who wants to use it. So I think it opens up some very interesting opportunities for companies that want to collaborate and use the platform and the tools that are embedded in the platform. But it also raises some interesting issues because it's a big Chinese company. And given the nature of things these days, I'm sure that if a big company wants to work with that platform, it will raise some yellow and maybe some red flags in various places. So that's just one thing.
Yeah, thank you, ISSIP. I think let's just say the word trust. We're at this, my mentor, Doug Engelbart, talked about the coevolution of the human system and the tool system, and the human system, of course, the various aspects of that. But trust is fundamental, and I think all these new institutional arrangements, it's a very, very interesting time. Thank you, ISSIP. I want to just, Larry, there's a couple others I want to try to call on too, just to get their perspectives on the day. Could you just, Larry Heiner, just mention a little bit of your perspective so far on the day?
Sure, it's been great because of these multiple perspectives on the topic. So you kind of throw out on the top of the water this idea of expertise, and then all these different perspectives come up to it and give some information, opinion, thoughts around perspective on from their vision, their view of it, and all of that will. If I like your idea of the big tent, I've got L&D background as well, and so within that big tent, there's room for a lot of perspectives. A couple of things I'll mention. I think we do need to differentiate in our language around experts versus expertise. So it's not equivalent. Experts maybe hold expertise or something, but I think as we look at the future of expertise, we're not just looking at the future of experts as we've experienced them in the past, but of expertise. Where is it generated? Where does it come from? How does it maintained? How do we use it? All of those things are parts of expertise that's separate from experts. The trust thing that you brought up most recently, and it's, I think, Paul Zak who writes about the trust molecule, the oxytocin, I think, molecule. What happens that enables trust between individuals and between institutions and between governments and government states, nation states, and such as Scott was talking about in the chat. So yeah, trust is going to be a big part of it. We're assuming good intention on all this. Terry was, and as you were talking about Heather's position at Mastercard, and there's this enormous amount of trust in the people who are working there. And I think that that's a wonderful thing. I think that's great, and that's where we need to go.
Thanks,
and one final thing is we can look at like the Kirkpatrick model when we talk about skills and competencies and behaviors and results and learning activities that people will be responsible for in their own work. And I think that that's in the future where some of the areas that we can talk about moving forward, maybe in our expertise 2.0.
Great, yeah, and a good reminder that, and Michelle, I'm going to call on you in a bit, and Dr. Philippe, I'd like to call on you in a minute, and Bert, I don't know if you can say some things, and Yuri, I don't know if you can say some things, but if you're coming off your, if you show your face visibly, I know I can ping you for additional commentary. But Dr. Philippe, I know you're an expert on decision systems, and what is your thought of the day? You've heard a lot of perspective.
It was quite an interesting discussion today, and I had various point of views, and well, the decision-making process is improved when the expertise is improved too. And well, I have to digest slowly what I have heard today. And so you see, I'm for the first time in this company and listen to you, and I had the impression that almost everybody here know each other. And
some of us do well, yes. Yeah.
Yes, I'm quite a newcomer, and I need some time to digest what I have heard today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation, and I will gladly attend the further invitations, further meetings.
Thank you. Yuri, I see you came off mute, and we've got about 8 minutes left, and there's still a couple of people I'm going to call on, but
no problem. I can take it for all the 8 minutes.
You're an old codger like me, retired from IBM.
Yeah. So one of the things I see here is, I'm afraid, a lot of words that don't have, well, maybe they're just, people focus more on the structure, theory, semantics, and logic. I'd like to see some examples of how all this works. For me, that's what would be helpful. I find, this is honestly, this is a great conversation, and people have spoken have been very capable, but it's nice to see how does this work in practice. Here ends the lesson. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuri. Yes, indeed. And I see Michel has his hand up. Michel Leonard from Switzerland, my good colleague who started the International Explorations of Service Science. Michel, what are your thoughts on the day?
I think it was a wonderful meeting, very rich, because the domain is so large, we need to have several pertinent perspectives about that. And notably, the domain of expert is very crucial today. I think it's not the same in industry and in university. I am at the University of Geneva, but I work also with industrial people, and experts of research project today. If we want to be very serious for the development of society, IT project needs to have a part of human science. It's clear.
Yes.
And for me, and it's the mix that you know better than I, because you are the founder of service science. And it's the same about service dominant logic. And that is so important to have this in the background to be an expert. But today, what I observe for expertise, for academic research projects, we don't have that. We don't have a mix of experts from IT, from scientific, clear scientific aspects in natural sciences, and experts in human sciences. And when we have,
and Michel,
very rarely, when we have this mix, there is no common language.
And Michel, I want to thank you because you run the International Explorations of Service Science, and you try to bring all of these different disciplines together to have a coherent conversation, which is challenging, but I think it's important work. And I think what we hope at ISSIP is we're exposing people in industry and academia to each other in government and other places maybe that have never met each other on topics of mutual interest. And then sometimes what happens is they get together and write a nice paper for a conference like yours or a journal like the one I know Dr. Philippe runs. And I think in those writings, in the papers, and it certainly has benefited me to read Rodrigo's papers in preparation for this, and Davide Niccolini's papers and papers from other sources. I think we've got over 100 sources in our white paper now. But really going deep through those papers, there are examples, Yuri. I mean, if you get a chance to read Rodrigo's paper on the nickel mines in the lost regions of Brazil, it's really eye-opening, very practical stuff, different, safety issues around very big, dangerous equipment. Molten nickel is very, very dangerous. And I think those practical examples of safety that you brought out and 3 types of human judgment, Rodrigo, were fantastic. I'll just ask, we're 3 minutes away. So Shamita-san, thank you for joining. Can you say maybe 1 minute and then we'll switch over to Michelle for the last words.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Thank you very much for invitation to this great arena. Yasunori, he invited me to, he connected me to you. And so I'm very, very looking forward to discussing you on this issue. I can share the same page with you on the issue of human resources. It is very similar in Japan, and so yeah, I have nothing to say about a specific issue on this time, but I really looking forward to working with you in the United States. I'm in Washington, D.C. now, so please keep in touch. Thank you.
Oh, and I hope we meet you at a future ISSIP event in Silicon Valley in person. That'd be great. Michelle, thank you, and you get the last word.
Thank you. Wow, this has been most enjoyable to me, and just what a learning experience, mind-bending, mind-expanding. And I'm looking forward to working tightly with Jim again, the September part 2 of this conversation. And I just wanted to share with everyone that, again, is September 28th. There's a link in the chat to go ahead and register, or on the website, ISSIP.org. You can pre-register. We've already confirmed, a few of our speakers from IBM. Joanne Wright she's the VP Enterprise Operations and Services for IBM. Is going to be on a panel, and we have the GIS lead for service innovation from Cisco. And I'm looking forward to hoping to achieve the same blend of academic, industry, government, bodies, and perspectives. For part 2, I welcome ideas and inputs. It's michelle@issip.org. And thank everyone for coming. Jim, for the excellent work putting together a great array of perspectives, and everyone for making the time. See you in September.
Thank you all. Bye now. Thanks, everyone. Really great appreciation to everyone, panelists, participants. Thanks so much. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.